You've told yourself the same story for years, that you just need more discipline, more motivation, more willpower. So you set the alarm, you made the plan, you wrote the list, and for a few days, maybe a week, something shifted. You felt it, then it collapsed. You went back, and you told yourself the story again. Here is what no one is going to tell you. Discipline was never your problem. You do not lack discipline. What you lack is a standard. And the difference between those two things, once you actually understand it, will change the way you operate for the rest of your life. This is not a motivation problem. The research confirms it. Studies conducted across elite military training programs found that the primary differentiator between candidates who completed selection and those who quit was not physical capacity. The men who rang the bell weren't weaker. They were operating without a defined floor, without a line they had decided in advance they would never cross. The men who finished had that line. Quitting wasn't an option their identity permitted. That is not discipline. That is a standard. You see this in every domain. The athlete who trains through injury isn't running on willpower, they're running on a self-image that does not include a version of themselves that stops. The person who is consistently at their best in the hardest conditions, under the most pressure, has not found a source of discipline that doesn't run dry. They've built something underneath the discipline, something that holds when discipline fails. And discipline always fails eventually, because discipline is a resource. It depletes. It fluctuates. It abandons you precisely when life gets heavy. Standards don't fluctuate, because they are not a feeling. They are a decision. Marcus Aurelius became Roman emperor in 161 AD. He did not want it. He was a student, a philosopher, a man who preferred books and quiet reflection to the machinery of empire. The position was handed to him, and then the empire spent 19 years trying to break him. Plague, war on multiple fronts, betrayal from inside his own court, the death of children, the slow erosion of everything he had built. He never published a single word in his lifetime. What we now call the Meditations, the most studied Stoic text ever written, was a private journal, written to himself, not for posterity, not for an audience, not to be remembered, written as a daily act of holding himself to account. In Book 5, he wrote this: "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for?" He wasn't writing this from a place of strength. He was writing it as a reminder, because even Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, the man history still studies 2,000 years later, needed to hold himself to a standard every single morning. He didn't rely on discipline. He relied on a self-image he had already decided was non-negotiable. The standard came first. The discipline followed automatically. This is the part most men have backwards. So why don't most men operate this way? Why do they keep reaching for discipline, a resource that runs out, instead of building the foundation that makes discipline automatic? 3 reasons. The first, standards require an identity commitment most men are terrified to make. When you say, I'm going to be more disciplined, that is a behavior. Behaviors can pause. Behaviors can have off days. Behaviors can be excused. When you say, I am the kind of man who does not quit, that is a standard. That is identity. And your brain will do almost anything to protect your identity, including getting out of bed when it doesn't want to, including finishing what it started, including refusing to accept less. The cost of a standard is that you can no longer excuse yourself. And most men are not ready to pay that price. So they keep reaching for discipline instead, because discipline comes with the option of a bad day. A standard doesn't. The second, low standards are comfortable because they require no confrontation with who you currently are. A standard is a mirror. It shows you the gap between who you are and who you have decided to be. And for most people, that gap is painful to look at. So instead of raising the standard, they lower it. They redefine what's acceptable. They call it being realistic. Marcus Aurelius called this something else. He called it cowardice. Not weakness, cowardice. Because it is always a choice. Let me ask you something. Think of the one area of your life where you keep falling short, where you keep starting and stopping, where you keep saying next week, next month, when things calm down. Now ask yourself honestly, have you actually decided, not hoped, not planned, not wanted, decided that this is non-negotiable? Most men haven't. They've wished, they've wanted, they've set goals, but they have never drawn the line. There is a difference between a goal and a standard. A goal is a ceiling, the best you could achieve. A standard is a floor, the worst you will accept. Most men are obsessed with the ceiling. They have no floor, and they wonder why they keep falling. The third reason, and this is the one most men refuse to hear. Most men have been conditioned to believe that wanting something badly enough creates discipline. It doesn't. Desire is temporary. It spikes and fades. It responds to emotion, to circumstance, to how much sleep you got. Standards are structural. Marcus Aurelius didn't get out of bed at dawn because he wanted to. He didn't feel like leading an empire every morning. He wrote to himself specifically about the days he didn't feel like it. He got out of bed because the version of himself who stayed in bed did not exist within his standards. He had structurally removed the option. That is the mechanism. Not more desire. Not better habits. Not the right morning routine. The decision made in advance, with no exceptions about who you will and will not be. So here's what you actually do. Not in theory. Not eventually. Tonight. Step 1. Identify the one area. Not 5. 1. The area where, if you are honest with yourself right now, you know exactly what you are avoiding. You already know what it is. It's the thing that came to mind when I asked you the question a few minutes ago. Write it down. Not in your phone. On paper. The physical act of writing is an act of commitment. It means something different to your brain. Do this tonight before you sleep. Step 2. Define the floor. Not the goal. Write down the minimum. The non-negotiable version of this behavior. Not the ideal. Not the best case. The floor. Not I want to train 5 times a week. The floor I do not go more than 2 consecutive days without training. This is not negotiable. It does not depend on how I feel. It does not depend on what's happening. That floor, that minimum commitment, is your standard. The moment you have a floor, you have a structure. The moment you have a structure, discipline is no longer required. Compliance becomes the default. Failure becomes the exception that requires effort to achieve. Step 3. Attach it to your identity. This is the step almost everyone skips, and it's the step that makes the other 2 permanent. Your standard has to become a statement about who you are. Not what you do, who you are. I am someone who does not miss 2 consecutive days. I am someone who finishes what he starts. I am someone who does not accept less from himself. Say it out loud. Write it down. Read it tomorrow morning. Marcus wrote his standards to himself every single morning. Not because he forgot them. Because repetition is how identity is reinforced. Because the mind drifts. And you have to bring it back. One final thing on this. The moment you set a real standard, a standard with teeth, you will immediately want to negotiate with it. The voice will come quickly. It will sound reasonable. It will offer you one exception. How you respond to that first negotiation is who you actually are. Not who you want to be. Who you are. You came into this video believing discipline was your problem. It isn't. Discipline is a symptom. The root is the standard you have been quietly refusing to set, because setting it means you can no longer pretend the gap doesn't exist. Marcus Aurelius led an empire for 19 years. Fought wars he didn't start. Buried people he loved. Watched everything he built get tested at every turn. And every single morning he wrote to himself. He held himself to account. Not because he was perfect. Not because it came naturally. Because his standard required him to try. Every day. Without exception, he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Not tomorrow. Not when things calm down. Not once you have more motivation, more time, more certainty. Now, the gap between who you are and who you know you could be, it has one name. And you've always known what it is. The standard you have been refusing to set. Set it tonight. If this landed, subscribe to the Inner Citadel. This is where the work gets done. The next video in this series goes deeper. We move from standards to silence, and what Seneca understood about power that most men will never be taught.